Hi everyone, welcome to this week's video, which looks at the meetings that you have with the local authority and relevant professionals.
So then another meeting, let's go down the scale. So let's go with
Local authorities and professionals?
Oh no, I wasn't going to go. Okay, let's go local authorities and professionals before we kind of come down the rest of the chain.
Okay, so local authorities and professionals, again, depends who's calling the meeting. Local authorities have limited time. I think we have to recognise that. I know that we all moan about local authorities, but I think they are stretched. They don't have enough staff to do the jobs that they need to be done. They haven't got the funding to do things. They're probably just as frustrated as you are, and they can come across as a bit of a job's worth sometimes, but that's probably because their hands are tied. So I do actually feel, I know we slate them an awful lot, but I do actually feel sorry for the individuals who are working for not sorry for them. I do sympathise with the individuals who work for local authorities because it is a tough bloody job.
And it's like any large organisation. They've got procedures that they have to follow. They will follow those procedures. Those procedures might not have been changed for the last 20 years, but they still have to follow them. And they don't always review those procedures and change those procedures to make them a bit more smoother and flow better.
No, and they're not always well trained. It's a bit like taking in our TAs. So, you can be an SEN officer who has no SEN background, which is quite scary in its sense, but to be fair, they're not earning an awful lot of money. I've seen those jobs advertised for between 23,000 25,000. I wouldn't want to do it for 25,000. I'm sorry, only if it was one day a week maybe, but it's not. It's a full-time job on 25,000. So they're not incentivised to go and learn about the law. They're not incentivised to go and learn. They're going to be given a handbook. They're going to be told, this is what you need to do. Here's the process. This is what you're following. Off you go and do it. So I feel sorry for them. So it depends who you're meeting with in a local authority. Bear this in mind. So if you're meeting with somebody who doesn't have any swaying power in the local authority, basically the only thing you can do there is to quote the law at them and make it clear that actually you do understand their role and you understand the complication. However, they need to take it back to their superiors. I think that's important. In terms of scheduling those meetings and how you make an agenda for those meetings, generally speaking, it'll be dictated by them. It'll be a single item agenda. If it's with somebody further up in the local authority, what I would suggest you do is write some notes first. So they are going to try and throw back at you, well, actually, it's not paragraph 9.212, it's paragraph 6.314. There isn't a paragraph 6.314. There is a 9.212. They're going to try and do that with you, and they're going to try and say, yes, but we're part of the stop valve system, so that doesn't apply. Well, actually, the law still does apply. So you're going to have to go in with your defence ready, and that can be tough. So the advice from Tom would be talk to your school's lawyer. Now, that if you're a local authority school, that might be tricky because it could be the local authority lawyer, or you can engage private lawyers. But or just go and do a bit of research. Go and ask a question. Ask a question in the Facebook group. But get your ducks in a row. It's Easter, isn't it? Get your ducks in a row before you actually go into those meetings and be really, really clear. And again, it's a little bit like the Ofsted one. Know what it is you want to say and have your evidence to back it up and give your good examples. Don't go in and think, I can talk about that because I remember it. Go in with it on a bit of paper because you're going to forget it. So
if you do want any kind of legal advice type stuff, you can come into one of our drop-in sessions with Tom as well, and he will try to answer it as much as he can do. Just be aware that it will be a generic response, but you are better off contacting him via email to be able to kind of go through the whole thing.
Yeah, and they have a really good package actually.
Yes.
So rather than having to pay for individual solicitor sessions, which are about £380 an hour, what you can do is you can, as a school or even as a multi-academy trust, you can buy into a package, a bit like we do with our traded services, to be fair. You buy into a package and then you can dip into that package as you need it. So if you only need half an hour this month but you need 2 hours next month, if you've got a 5-hour package, you've just used half of it, but it kind of works out much better. So talk to Burkitt Long, talk to Thomas and see
and they're not ridiculous with the amount of hours that they charge you for like 5 minutes worth of things. To
be fair, okay, sometimes I get a message from somebody, it's like, I think I know what the answer is, but I just need to double check, and I'll email Tom and he answers me and he gives me everything I need, and they're quite intensive emails he replies
they
with.
really are detailed. We have used
there
them
is
several
no
times.
charge for that at all. That does not mean everybody can start emailing me with their legal questions. I don't have enough time to send them to Tom.
No, we don't. We don't have enough time for that. Right. So, LA dealt with.
And professionals. So we've got professionals.
Professionals as well are in that kind of category, or do we do professionals separately?
Professionals, again, usually it is you requesting a meeting with a professional, so it's you coming up with the agenda. So if you are wanting to sit down with the EP, so I know most people don't have the chance to do this anymore, but it is really useful if you can do it. Sitting down with the EP and talking about anonymised names. So that sounds a bit weird. Basically, that's where you go in, and instead of having all of the permission to discuss Fred and Daisy and all the rest of it, you are going in and talking about a generic child, so child A, child B, child C, and you're talking about their difficulties and getting EP advice on generic ways to support those students. It is a really useful way, because then that means you're not just going to use it with child A, you can go and use it with child X, Y and Z as well, and it upskills you at the same time to then go and disseminate that amongst your staff and to be able to meet other needs within your school. Unfortunately, we don't tend to have that time available to us anymore, but if you can get hold of any of it, do. But I would also recommend seeing if you can do it with any of your other professionals. So your speech and language therapist, if you've got one, drag them in, your counsellors, your behaviour support team, your specialist teachers. Having that really generic conversation is really useful. When we're working with professionals, they can go down that route of blinkered focus on the child that we're talking about, and they forget the fact that you're dealing with that child in amidst 29 others in a class, 700 others in a school. Yep. So what they're suggesting to you to do with that child may not be feasible in your school. And I think, sometimes we get a report and we read it and we get really frustrated about that, especially if the parents have also got a copy of that report. I think that can be preempted beforehand by having a conversation with these professionals with, okay, I need you to see this child in that classroom. I need you to see them in that situation, and I need you to give me strategies that can be delivered within the classroom. Yeah. Without me having an additional adult, without me having to do something entirely different for this child. I'm more than happy to put things in place for this child, but it cannot be at the detriment of the other 29 in the class. Yeah. Or how do I fit it in with the other 29? I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying, ignore that child because we can't do that for them. We're going to do the other 29 instead. That's not what I'm saying. But asking those professionals to try and focus on what can be delivered to everybody. Adaptive teaching, is that all in the room kind of focus again. What can we do that fits in with everybody rather than isolating that child for something entirely different that makes a problem for everybody?
It's another just a standard consequence and actions piece, isn't it? If I do this with one child, what's the consequences, not just to that child socially with everybody else in their thing, but what's the consequences to the rest of the group? What's the consequences to the school? What's the consequences to the wider public? Even the focus onto the parents. What are the parents going to think about this? What are the other teachers going to... you've got to take all of that into consideration when you're looking at what kind of intervention or provision you're putting into the schools via one of those professional court talks.
I had to chuckle. Somebody shared an EHC with me the other day. So it was a child who was struggling with social interactions. So the advice in the EHC, what had been written in section F, was that this child needed one-to-one adult to student support throughout the whole day, and should not be expected to work with other students. Okay, so that was quite weird anyway, because why would you kind of write that? But then further down it went, needs to participate in social skills groups. I was like, hold on a minute, how can you participate in a social skills group if I'm not participating in it with my peers? Yeah. Because social skills between a child and an adult are very, very different.
Very, very different.
Very different. They've got, they've got to learn to work with others their own age. If there really is a reason they don't need to, they don't need to. But it's that whole idea of how can I have a social skills group when you've just told me I've got to have one-to-one all day and not be required to interact with any of my peers? If I'm not required to interact, how can I have a social skills group?
To be honest, one-to-one interventions just they don't help people in society. They don't help the whole social economics of things. It's not really good.
It's not sustainable.
It's not good for children, to be honest.
No, it's not good for children. There are some students, if they've got a physical difficulty or a disability even, disability, or if they've got a sensory impairment, then it could be appropriate to have an adult available. But I had a blind student who had a TA, who actually, she was so independent that while the teacher was delivering a bit at the beginning of the lesson, which she couldn't see, so she was just listening, the TA would actually go and support other students in the classroom, even though she was technically named as the one-to-one for that student. Yeah. But she was able to go off and do it. I think some people have got quite precious over this one-to-one. It means one-to-one. No.
It means when they need it.
Yes.
That's what it means.
Unfortunately, that would be considered a woolly statement if we wrote it on an EHC.
I looked after, so as a TA, I looked after a young adult who had epilepsy.
Yep.
So I walked around with him, I supported him, I had to be with him occasionally. But if he was in the classroom, he was fine to kind of be left, and I could go around and I could support all the other young adults within in that class. It was mainly only when he was walking somewhere, I just had to walk beside him, because you didn't know when he was going to have a seizure. Or anything like that, and most of the time it was he went to the toilets, and that was the main danger point for us, and that's when it would occur. But
which I think is why you got the job, because you were the only male, weren't you?
I was one of two males as a TA, and it was one of the reasons why I'd got that job, just because he was having that many seizures in the toilets, because he tried to get himself away from everything to stop him from being embarrassed up against with his friends and pieces like that. So he tried to remove himself from that a social skill that he'd kind of learned from it. But yeah, every time it was in the toilet. So, and it was a female that had him before, so they had to put somebody in that was male for that. But that's a whole nother story.
It is. But you can't really prepare an agenda for some of those things, though. It's not like you can go in with your hit list of, I want to tick all these things off. But you should have an idea of what you want to achieve from those meetings with professionals. So what is it you want to come away with? Because very often they will go away with what they want, and you come out of it thinking, I've just spent an hour and a half in there and I don't really know what I've got from it. So what do you want to get from that meeting? That's why I quite like those generic style ones.
Yeah, always plan your outcomes, as they say. Always plan your outcomes first, and then work backwards from what I need to do.
What do I want?
What do I want? How do I need to get this?
What is this hour and a half worth to me?
Yeah.
So if I wasn't here, what would I be doing instead? Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video. In that particular one, we discussed the making sure that our local authority knows the law, because sometimes they like to make their own laws up. So making sure that they know it, challenging them, and to do that you actually have to understand the law yourself. So make sure you nip into our webinar sessions with Thomas from Burkitt Long, where he goes through various things for us, and he will answer your questions too. If you have got a school lawyer, make sure you use them. So those of you that belong to multi-academy trusts are likely to have a legal advisor available, and they can give you advice. And very often that advice is not going to cost you anything additional on the fees that your multi-academy trust is already paying to them. And, make sure you're dipping into anything that's available for that. With regards to working with professionals, okay, what do we do? When they're coming in, what we really want them to do is focus on that whole class, not just tell us what we can do with the one child that completely contradicts everything that's going on with the other 29 in the classroom. We really need to get them to see the picture. And, professionals are coming from the right place. They are trying to do what is best for the child. But unfortunately, quite a lot of them have never been in that situation where they're having to deliver that wonderful therapy to that one child whilst trying to handle the other 29. They assume that we have other adults in the classroom to do it, or that we can miraculously get 29 5-year-olds to sit down and play with the Play-Doh whilst we deal with that one child. So do make sure you do that with them. Make sure that they're addressing the whole class and not the one child. And then finally, making sure that you get what you want from those meetings. So have your agenda ready, have your bullet points down there. What do you want to get out of it, as opposed to just somebody else ticking off their list to say that they have met with you. Take care, and we'll see you for the next video soon.